Welcome everyone to Utopia Talks. Today we'll be exploring the topic of the silent pandemic, ensuring good mental health and well-being through the SDGs. Now, before we get started, firstly, a warm welcome to everybody tuning in. We have people joining in from all over the world. And a couple of fun facts from the audience today. Our three major cities tuning in for this live webinar are Lisbon in Portugal, Dublin in Ireland, and also Medan in Sumatra Island of Indonesia. Amazing, the diversity. And the youngest person watching in tonight is 14 years old, and our oldest is 53 years old. What do you know? Again, the diversity. And of course, we received over 50 questions from the audience already who signed up, which we will try our best to address in the conversation tonight. And if not, remember, there is a chance for you to ask a question directly to our panelists during our Q&A session nearing the end of our talks. Of course, my name is Esta. I'm part of the Youthtopia team and the co-host for today's event. I'm joined by the founder of Youthtopia and my co-host for tonight, Melati.
Hey guys, I hope everybody is doing well, staying healthy, energized, and ready for some deep but positive and meaningful conversation tonight. My name is Melati, and I'll be co-hosting this event as Esta mentioned.
Also, I would like to give a little disclaimer before we start tonight's Youthtopia Talks. This event was organized to be a space for sharing experiences and knowledge regarding mental health and the importance of raising awareness on this topic. And so please do not self-diagnose and take anything from this event as medical advice. Always seek the advice of your mental health professional or other qualified health providers with any questions you may have about a certain condition.
All right, so without further ado, let us begin this Youthtopia Talks. Firstly, Youthtopia Talks, what is it? Well, it's one of the many different services that we at Youthtopia are providing to share knowledge, where we bring frontline young activists straight to you, and we dive deeper into global issues and potential solutions for a sustainable and systemic change. For this Youthtopia Talks in particular, the one that we have you joining us for tonight, we would like to do a deep dive into mental health and how the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, can help ensure this right for everyone. So according to the WHO, there has been a rapid increase in depression, self-harm, and suicide during this unsettling period of the COVID-19 pandemic. Though mental health is a key component within goal number 3 of ensuring good health and well-being by 2030, there are many initiatives from grassroots to raise awareness on this issue. More sustainable solutions are needed to ensure that help, support, and education on the topic are accessible to those who really need it.
And so, to discuss this topic further, please join us in welcoming our incredible lineup of young change makers today. We have Aeselia Aleeza, Michelle Abiero, and Elaine Michelle. Just a little quick round of applause for myself. Let me motion to Elaine first, and then Michelle, and then Aeselia to please introduce yourselves briefly before we move in to the talks itself.
Yes, so hi everyone. My name's Elaine, Michelle Teh. So there are two Michelles, that's why I was like, feel free to call me Elaine this time. I'm 18, I'm from Indonesia, and I run Self-Love Warrior Indonesia, which is basically a mental health platform and community to advocate about self-love and mental health. I look forward to the amazing discussions tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Elaine, for joining us. Let's jump to Michelle Abiero.
Hi guys, my name is Michelle Abiero. I am from Kenya. I am 18 years old and I am the founder of Project Smile. So Project Smile is a project that was started with an aim of spreading awareness on mental health and suicide here in Kenya.
Amazing. We have a representative from Kenya, from Africa here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're glad to host you and have you tonight here with us, Michelle. And now we move on to our final speaker. Last but not least, we have Aeselia. Please, Aeselia.
Hi everyone, my name is Aeselia Aleeza. You can call me Aeselia. I'm 22 years old. I'm from Indonesia, currently living in Jakarta. I co-founded Ubah Stigma. Ubah Stigma is a nonprofit organization with a vision for an Indonesia that values mental health as an integral component of a healthy community. And with that, we have online and offline campaigns and programs. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Aeselia, for joining us once again. Right? This is exciting. We have, a lot of a female lineup here, right? Of activists, young change makers on the front line of, raising awareness on mental health, a very, so to speak, undermined issue that needs to be recognized and understood as an essential right, an essential part of our daily lives. So it's exciting, right? And I'm really, speaking of daily life and, our day-to-day activities, especially during this pandemic, I'm interested, with this opening question to our speakers today is, what has been your go-to self-care routine during this pandemic, right? Share some tips and tricks maybe on what has helped you go through the day. Let's start with Michelle Abiero. Perhaps you would like to share?
Yes, I would love to share. So, of course, this pandemic has been marked with a lot of uncertainty. And one thing as human beings that we don't like is uncertainty. We do not like not knowing what's coming tomorrow, the fact that we're not sure of a cure or when this pandemic will be over. Of course, the whole uncertainty bit is stressful. And of course, school being cancelled and school being online has been very stressful for many people, myself included. So one of my go-to healthcare routines these days has definitely been exercising. The benefits of exercising are amazing, and I'd have to say, people view exercising as something that you do to attain a certain body weight or a certain physique, but for me it's something that you are training your body to have strength and endurance, which is something amazing. Trying to push your body to just maybe lift weights and things of the sort, which is really amazing, and it allows you to de-stress. So that's my go-to self-care routine.
Okay, thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing. I think that that's definitely something so important. And also, for those of you joining, we did have a survey space, and a lot of the questions were like, how do we balance and how do we understand the importance of both physical health and mental health? So I think, thank you for bringing that to our attention so soon. Elaine, Michelle Teh, I'm going to pass it over to you. What is something that you do?
Yes, so Malati, in our breakout room, you saw my Bali background, and I'm so envious because I see your stories and there's so many greenery. I don't have that in Jakarta, so basically every day, no matter how busy I am, I make time from 5 to 6 around sunset, and all I do is I just lay outside, outside in my balcony, and I just do nothing. And for me, that has been amazing because I finally have time to just not do anything and recharge. Spiritually, I think. Yeah, spiritually, which is what people don't usually talk about. So I think everyone should try it once in a while. Just 30 minutes, 1 hour, it'll do you wonders.
Definitely that 5 to 6, that is like a golden hour. I definitely can relate to that and think, that it's a little bit of me time. And I think that's something that we should all value. Before moving on to Aeselia, I'm going to ask all of you watching, what is something that you guys are doing? We're curious to hear, put it in the chat, and let's see if there's something insightful that you can learn from all of the 40 participants we have joining us live on this Wednesday evening. Aeselia, I'm going to pass it over to you. What would be your self-care tip?
Yes, so same as Michelle, I would normally exercise because it really improves my mood. During pandemic, I guess you just want to lie down, be a potato couch. However, it really doesn't help our mental health, so that's why exercising is very important. Other than that, I would probably say I read books while turning on my essential oils. Using essential oils, because that's really calming and relaxing for me. So that's what I normally do.
Those essential oils, I have lavender just on as a standard next to my bedside table because I think that there's aromatherapy. There is definitely something behind it. There's magic and science to that. So thank you for sharing that tip. I think to move forward with this Youthtopia Talks on mental health and what is, sort of needed, I think in order for us to move forward or any further, we need to establish the grounds. And so the next question is really, what is the perception in each and every one of your areas or communities towards mental health? What is the status quo? Aeselia, I'm going to pass it over to you.
All right, thanks, Malati. So I think currently, based on the statistics, I think I'm just going to talk from the statistics first. It's from research Kesehatan Dasar. So it's a research basically in the health sector in Indonesia, and so currently there's around 15 million people who are experiencing emotional disorders. So that It would be depressive symptoms and anxiety symptoms, and that's above for people above 15 years old. So because as this is very prevalent, I think right now in Jakarta especially, the narrative is slowly changing into a more positive light. I think in Jakarta, there's more and more communities online, and the government is already putting out suicide prevention line. So I think the awareness is starting to change slowly. However, when I've spoken to like a few friends outside of Jakarta, it's pretty much still underground mental health, so people don't really talk about it. And I think people still use treatments such as spiritual or non-science-based treatments, which is totally fine. I think some works, however, still needs educating.
Right, right. Thank you for shedding light on that, especially, beyond Jakarta, because again, for our audience who are joining us from outside of Indonesia, just to give it a little context, again, Indonesia is a huge country, right? It's the largest archipelago country in the world, and our center is Jakarta, the island of Java. That's one of the most populous, dense populations in the world. But beyond that, right, it's a different story. Again, there's that gap between the accessibility to mental health services and whatnot in Jakarta and beyond Jakarta. So thank you, Aeselia, for shedding light on that. And I'm going to pass it over to Elaine Michelle Teh, right? Elaine, what do you think? What's the status quo in your perspective here in Jakarta, in Indonesia? What's going on?
So I'm probably going to take a more youth perspective at this question, because I think the most powerful things to affect people, especially when they were talking about mental health, are the stories. So I think in Jakarta, we like to think that we're doing good. And I'm not saying that we aren't, but the fact is that even though there are more communities showing up, there's more awareness, when we're actually stepping into schools, a lot of schools in Jakarta are still not as forward. Like, I've heard stories from students when they come talk to us, like, I wish we had a counselor who would actually do their job, because most times the counselor isn't actually providing the psychological support that students actually need. And I'm talking about Jakarta here. So imagine taking that to the outer regions of Jakarta, where education isn't even that good yet, and where there's actually a lack of counselors and a lack of education as a whole on mental health. So I think that's actually the beauty of the pandemic right now. The beauty of the pandemic, because right now, no matter where you are in Indonesia, you are spending more time online. And for Self-Love Warrior, that has actually expanded our reach. So when we did like a mini boot camp on mental health, we had students from Bengkulu, we had them from Lombok, we had them from East Indonesia, and that was very rewarding, I guess, since now we get to see the picture from a different perspective other than Jakarta.
100%. I mean, just to your point about going online and having suddenly a larger reach, for this specific and particular Youthtopia Talks, I was so simply blown away by the amount of people signing up in such a short time span. And it confirmed a lot of things. One, our age group and the people that are signing up for these things are a lot younger than anybody had anticipated. Secondly, they're coming on from all around the world. And thirdly, mental health is a topic that young people are curious about. We want to know more about it. We want to understand these big feelings, these big emotions, and yet, as to your point, the education system is not providing it. It's not supporting it. And so that's what we're really interested in with Youthtopia, not specifically just only to mental health, but to all the 17 sustainable development goals. How can we empower young people? And that's really what our work is all about. So Michelle, Abiero, what would you say, moving on from Indonesia to Kenya, what are some of the perceptions and status quo of how mental health is being perceived?
First off, Malati, I'd have to say that's a very, very good question. I'd have to say the issue of how mental health perceived is what I'd like to call a one story, the single story. Now, if you look at Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's TED Talk, which talks about the danger of a single story, it talks about show people as one thing and one thing only, and that is what they become. So we've shown mental health and mental illnesses as one thing only. We've shown them as people who are lazy, people who are incapable, people who are crazy and possessed, which I'm just like, how do you come up with the conclusion someone is possessed? And that is what we have started viewing mental health and people with mental illnesses. And to overcome this mindset, it has to take a lot of work. I'm not going to deny that it has to take a lot of work for us to overcome this mindset. I'd have to say we have started showing some progress. Ministry of Health getting involved in, campaigns against suicide, as we had National Suicide Prevention Day on 10th September. Our government stepped in, the Ministry of Health, who is putting out videos on social media, which is great. But we still have a long way to go. As Elaine said, we do have the issue of school counselors, for example. A lot of people don't feel comfortable confiding in the school counselors, despite the fact that they are there to support us and guide us through school. Most school counselors do not follow the protocols, such as privacy and the fact that you're not supposed to reveal what was discussed to you to other parties. You'd find that you discuss something with your teacher or your school counselor rather, and it's the talk of the entire staff room, which is unethical on so many levels. Going back to mental health, there's still people who have the notion that mental illnesses are a result of demonic possessions. And of course, science does not back this up. It's an issue we're still facing, but we have to overcome this mindset of mental illnesses are a sign of demonic possession, especially when it comes to less understood mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and paranoid schizophrenia specifically, or ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. People are like, no, this is demonic possession. And of course, trying to break this narrative that people have towards mental illnesses is such a hard thing. And aside from that, in Kenya, one of our laws that we have is that attempted suicide is illegal, so one could face jail time for that, hence making it very, very hard for people who have attempted suicide to get the help that they need. And we've seen cases of suicide rising during this pandemic. So of course, it's really concerning, but we are heading in the right direction.
Thank you, Michelle, for bringing that to light. The fact, I guess, for most of our audience that again are outside of Kenya, outside of Indonesia, Michelle mentioned about demonic possessions, and that is also the status quo in some of the regions here in Indonesia, that a lot of our population still believes in the power that, oh, these people who are mentally ill are just possessed by demons, or so to speak. That is real. That is the reality of it. And thank you so much for Michelle for again shedding light on the reality of the status quo on that, and how that is a major challenge despite the progress that your government is making, and through the grassroots communities in Kenya and also in Indonesia. Which leads me to, I guess, the next question, right? To you girls, to your organizations, to your projects. How have you and what you are doing with your organizations are breaking that status quo? What have you done so far? What has worked? What hasn't worked? And I'd like to explore that a little more. Maybe Elaine would like to go first.
I completely agree with what Michelle said. Like, I think in Indonesia, there are still cases of orang gila, like what we call orang gila, and that is often not even discussed in the mental health community, since it's a little bit more taboo and it's a little bit more hard to take on. But regarding Self-Love Warrior Indonesia, so I started this when I was 16. So at that age, like you can imagine, like people would be, why are you doing what you do? Because at that time, mental health was not as a big of an issue as it is right now. So it was very interesting to see how young people reacted when a young person spoke up about the issue, because at that time, all my peers were adults and psychologists, and I was like this one kid boosting at a mental health festival. So I think the key thing that we do as an organization is that we connect mental health with relatable issues that youth of today's face. So previously they would look at schizophrenia or like depression and anxiety, and they would view it as like a third person kind of issue. They'd be like, oh, okay, there's no way I'm going to face these things. Like, this is a far issue from me. Only people like them face this. And when we have our community of like young people from 15 to 21, when we talk about mental health in a way that youths understand it, they sort of grow empathy for the issue, which I think is the most powerful thing ever. Because even though we give them statistics, even though we give them facts, that doesn't move their hearts to take action. And so I think like the way that we approach our content, the way that we approach the community, that was different. And right now, I think what we're trying to focus more on is how do we actually engage with the youths? Because right now there is a growing number of people who spread information. But all this information is useless if nobody actually takes it and applies it in their own community. So right now, through our boot camp, actually, that's what we want to do. We want to take what our beliefs are and what the facts are and condense it in a way that youth can understand it, so that they can sort of multiply this effect in their own individual communities. And I think that has been a very rewarding month for us, trying to figure out how to do what you guys do at YOUTHTOPIA. So yes, thank you, Esther, for the question.
Amazing. I love how you put emphasis on empathy, right? I think that is an important and essential part of, getting to know one another, just build bridges to really understand the importance of mental health and really just build conversations to understand the gravity of this issue that might be difficult for, like you said, it's difficult. Everyone thinks of it as third person. It's difficult to relate to, but through empathy and the work that you do with your organization, it's really great. Let's move on to Aeselia. Maybe Aeselia, you would like to share a little bit on how you've broken the status quo right now. What has worked with you and your organization?
Yeah, thank you, Asta. So our organization is called Ubah Stigma, which means changing the stigma. So that is actually our vision, the vision of our organization, because we've seen that the reason why people are stopping to seek help, to seek mental health services, is because of the stigma. Because when those who have mental health issues try to speak out, the communities and the families are probably judgmental, or they start to think, why are you opening up? You're just seeking for attention, or you're just lacking in faith. So that's the stigma that we have in Indonesia. And so while seeking out help is actually very important for the recovery of someone's mental illness. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to break the stigma. And what we do, we have 4 missions in our organization, which is, first, we organize educational and informative programs about mental health. And we also encourage society to take action in taking care of their mental health and others. We also bridge access to mental health services for society, and also normalize mental health as a day-to-day topic conversation. Stigma occurs because of the perception that the society already have since long ago. And that is because a lack of education. So that's why we're trying to create programs and online campaigns that normalize and change the narrative of mental health. And so we have podcasts, and we invite, I think, a lot of public speakers, because I think in Indonesia, people are kind of driven by public figures. And so that's one of the strategies that we use. We also have our Let's Learn and Let's Talk programs, where we provide educational contents like webinars like what Utopias are doing now. And then we also do fundraising. So fundraising for Panti ODGJ, or rehabilitation centers for people with mental illness, those who are impacted by mental illness, and they're mostly underprivileged. And so currently we're also doing a campaign. It's called Let's Be Supportive. We're trying to foster a supportive community. And we're going to donate this money to this rehabilitation center. And from that, we do a lot of campaigns. We make documentaries so that people can actually see what the actual condition is like. And then we also have my favorite event, which is Senigma. So Senigma is a combination of word Seni and Enigma. So Seni means art, and enigma is a puzzle, something that is hard to understand, because we believe that art can be an effective medium for people to express themselves, and can be interpreted by other people, especially on something that not a lot of people understand, which is mental health issues, because it's a very subjective experience. And so we're trying to use those kind of strategies to just educate and promote about mental health, so that the narrative of mental health can change slowly.
That's very great. Very great to hear, Aeselia, that you're tackling the root cause of it itself, right? The stigma, and using that to change the narrative, to tell better stories, and again, use empathy, like Elaine said, to really push that cause of mental health forward. Let's move to Michelle Abiero now. Would you like to explain on how you've, change the status quo there in Kenya with the work that you do?
Wow, that's a very beautiful question. And I have to say, Elaine and Aeselia have answered this question very well. And I am honestly so honored to be just speaking amongst them. Now, first of all, for me, I have to actually define mental health. And my favorite definition for mental health is according to WHO, which states that mental health is a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own potential, abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to to make a contribution to his or her own community. From this definition, we can tell if anything of the above is compromised, something is not going to be okay in your mental health. People only view like mental health as something like it's only for you to have an issue with your mental health, it has to be a mental illness. For example, emotional abuse can affect your mental health. Does it mean you will develop a mental illness? No. Stress from schoolwork can affect your mental health. Conflicts and all that, they do affect our mental health. And with that being said, in the year 2016, a friend of mine confided in me and told me that they were battling suicidal thoughts. Now, that younger me thought, the best thing to do in such an instance is for her to tell her parents. And I asked her, could you tell your parents? And she told me no. And I didn't realize how bad the stigma towards mental health was at that time. I wasn't just in the sphere to realize how awful the stigma was. And I think that's because I was living in my own little bubble. So after that, in 2017, someone happened to attempt suicide. There's someone that I knew, and they always seemed like the happiest person. They were always smiling. They were always telling me like the funniest jokes and all that. And I realized there's something about, like, it was a trend. Everyone who I knew who was battling a mental health issue had a fake smile. I call it a fake smile because they always seemed happy, but they really weren't. They were battling something. So my friends and I decided that we need to end the fake smile. So we started Project Smile. Smile stands for fake smiles. So we want to put an end to fake smiles. So our motto is no more fake smiles. We want to reach a point where we actually do not have fake smiles. And our initial focus was on depression and generalized anxiety disorder, because these were topics, or these were mental illnesses that were not at the time viewed as normalized or viewed in a good light. And of course, we're reaching a point where I'm realizing that people are viewing depression as something that occurs. It's the most common mental health disorder. It has around 264 million people on earth have depression. So of course, it's the most common mental illness, and about 4 million people in Kenya have a mental illness. So of course, I realized the conversation has started. The conversation on mental health has started, and that was great for me. It was groundbreaking. And when we started Project Smile, the first question is, how are we going about it? Because I thought of very many ways. I thought, could we organize for physical classes? I realized this was impossible as I was in boarding school and I could not come between home and my then school because they were really far. I think it was like 180 kilometers. So of course it was a 3-hour drive. So I thought of the best way to go about this is social media, because honestly speaking, as teenagers, as youth, we spend a lot of our time on social media, different social media platforms, be it Twitter, be it Instagram, be it TikTok nowadays, be it YouTube and all that. I thought, wow, we can actually create educational content on YouTube or on Instagram and to share it with people. And due to features such as IGTV and live videos, it has made our work easier. So of course, I will do maybe my research on a certain mental illness. Take, for example, dissociative identity disorder. We're now looking at the mental illnesses that are still viewed as a taboo, because when you say dissociative identity disorder, not so many people know what dissociative identity disorder is. And that's when someone has more than one personality in them. It used to be known as multi-personality disorder, and that's because it was believed that that person has more than one personality in them, but they're referred to as alters. So different people coexisting in their host. And of course, when you explain that concept to a person, they're like, okay, that sounds like an attention seeker or someone who's possessed. And we have to get to the root causes of this stigma towards mental illness. Is it that people view it as people who are seeking attention, people who are possessed? Because that is still a stereotype that is there to date, and we have to, question it and overcome it. We have to overcome it. And that means asking uncomfortable questions, having uncomfortable discussions. Of course, I can talk about the great success that we've had, but I'm still going to focus on the failures that we've had so that we can find a way forward. One thing, in as much as our generation is becoming, Gen Z and millennials are becoming educated on mental health, the importance of mental health, the importance of actually caring for your friends or your family who have mental illnesses and all that. The previous generations, or our parents rather, do not have the same approach towards mental health. They really do not. Because most of the time, someone will reach out to me and tell me, Michelle, I have this and this and this. I think I am having suicidal thoughts, or I am self-harming. And my first reaction is, I do not advocate for self-diagnosis. And especially if someone has the resources to go get diagnosed by a professional, I will tell them, please go ahead. But then the issue comes in of, how do I tell my parents I want to seek help? Now, it's always been a question of how do we merge the bridges between us and our previous generation, the previous generations of the generations of our parents. How do we come up with a solution that makes them understand that we're battling challenges that are more unique than theirs.
And
For example,
I think Michelle, just I wanna listen more, but I do wanna jump to our other questions as well. And you did bring a really good segue here about talking, about parents and how do we bridge the current generation with the current generation, rising young change makers with older generations, right? I mean, if we just take a listen and look back to what all of you are doing, it's incredible as young change makers, the way that you're kind of breaking the status quo with your own ways, but at the core of it is really trying to build up this community that no other generation has really ever done before, right? Speaking about it, speaking up, voicing it. So that brings me to a question that Julian from Indonesia, who signed up for this Youthtopia Talks, he asked the question, how do we express and explain mental health to the previous generations that just don't seem to get it? How do we communicate that to them? Elaine, I'm gonna pass it over to you.
Some older generations are really like hardline against talking about it, maybe because they have never had that experience, or maybe because they grew up never really having someone to actually talk about these things regarding mental health. So I think like when we want to share about it, we never want to approach it as if, hi, I know what I'm talking about and I'm better at it than you are, if that makes sense. So whenever teenagers ask me like, how do I tell my parents that it's not right to make fun of people with mental health, then I would just say, okay, like talk to them as if you're talking to a friend. Don't start lecturing your parents. Don't start giving them facts that they don't care about. I think something that has worked for one of our community members was that she told her parents like, how would you react if that was me? Or like, what if I was the one that had anxiety and didn't know how to cope? Like, what would you guys do for me? And in that sense, her parents were more of, okay, well, if that was you, then I'd give you help. Like, I would try my best and put all my resources to make sure that you get better. And then she replied, okay, so why can't we think of it in that way for this person who is facing this, even though she isn't your daughter, but why can't we see it from that point of view of trying to help her out and getting her the best treatment? So I think that is a really good way of trying to personalize this topic. Like, it's not something that if you're my mom and you don't know it, I want to lecture you. It's more about like, this is something that can happen to everyone. And making sure that as a young change maker or someone who wants to talk about it, we don't try to sort of, I'm not saying go beyond ourselves, but we should try from our smallest circles first. Because someone asked me like, okay, I want to preach the message of mental health to my whole village, and everyone in my village is so against mental health. What do I do? And my first response was like, okay, why don't you start from your most familiar circles of your friends maybe, and then you expand to your family and onto your community, because it's impossible to fight a battle alone, and it always feels better when you have someone there behind you. For, I think, example, like Asael has Esta and Uba Stigma, Malati has Isabel and Bye Bye Plastic Bags. And for me, I have my team at Self Love Warrior. And I can talk about this team because I used to do it all alone, and it's very emotionally draining. So please find a team and start from your smallest circles and personalize the topic.
Yes, I think personalizing the topic, but you already went a little further on like what exactly are the tips on getting involved in this journey. But to stick to the question of Julian, Aeselia, I'm going to pass it over to you. How do you capture this expression and explanation to older generations?
I think what Elaine has delivered is they're really good tips. Don't lecture our parents. Try to ask first maybe a question to them. What do you think about mental health? Because I think if we put ourselves in their position, for example, we don't know about a certain topic and then suddenly someone just bring it up and then started like rambling onto you, sometimes you just don't have any interest in it. Maybe it'll be more appealing if you can start by, do you know about mental health? Have you ever experienced it? And then start sharing about your experience, or start sharing about other people's stories, or what mental health is, what's causing mental illness and so forth.
Okay, so we heard a couple different approaches, and I've got a pen and paper all the time at these Youthtopia Talks because I'm learning a lot of different new things. So we heard make it personal. Next thing was start with a question. Michelle, what would you have to add?
First off, my first advice is do not go in a confrontational tone. It's not a fight. It is not a fight. It is a discourse. You're not trying to fight the person. You're trying to convince them that mental health is important. So it's not a fight. It's an issue of trying to understand the other side's perspective. So as Aeselia said, questions matter in this conversation. Questions matter. For example, what do you think about mental health, and why do you think about maybe mental health in that way? Why do you think, like, if for example this person believes that someone with a mental illness is an attention seeker, why do you think this person is an attention seeker? And you see, such questions, they allow somebody to question their own logic and ask themselves, okay, where are my biases stemming from? Because we all have biases as human beings, so we have to question ourselves and ask ourselves where this bias is stemming from. So once you're in that situation where it's no longer confrontational, but more of a discourse and more of a discussion, then you can bring in stories. Because one thing I love about stories is that they have the ability to empower people. They have the ability to restore dignity. As it's important, because the dignity of people with mental illnesses is lost. We have made them look like people who are crazy and people who cannot fit in our society. So of course, stories have the ability to restore dignity. For example, take John Green, who is a writer and wrote The Fault in Our Stars, which is quite a popular movie. One would not know he has obsessive compulsive disorder. Now, if you talk about OCD from the facts, you'd think, wow, this person cannot function in society. But I'll tell you, look at John Green. He has written amazing books, and he's part of so many great things. So take him as an example. So try to empower and dignify the people that you have taken the dignity away from.
Love that. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen, we got 3 solid tips right there. I think we can start with Michelle's tip of, approach this as a discussion and not a fight, right? It's not maybe potential debate, but again, it's not a fight between you and your parents or the older generation. It's just a conversation. Approach it as a conversation, and then take Elaine's tip of personalizing it, getting to know them, tell it through personal stories, and then maybe start with a question, right? Be curious about their own experience as well, and put yourself in their shoes as well. And now I guess, we've already talked about, again, the current status quo in your communities, in your countries, and how you've changed that status quo for the better for this topic of mental health, and even discussed how we can bridge this conversation with the older generations and even beyond our communities as well. But I think it's important to also talk about the future, right? To really look ahead, especially in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. 2030, we're only 10 years away. We're running out of time, so to speak. And, it's safe to say that I think mental health is not, I don't want to say it's not a priority, but I guess more needs to be done to prioritize it. So I want to ask our incredible lineup of speakers here, what do you think we can do? What do you think can be done to make sure that mental health is prioritized and also emphasized in the Sustainable Development Goals? And how can the SDGs even play a role to really achieve what we want to see in the future of mental health? Ooh, hard question there, I think. I just thought about it myself, but let's jump to Aeselia. What do you think, Aeselia, we can do?
That's such a great question, and it's quite a big scope. I think there's a lot of stakeholders that can really be involved in this. Say, for communities, I think young people can really take action and really be involved in this, because, young generation are who are going to change what's up ahead. And we are the voices for a change in the coming future. And so what we can do is actually, the organizations that we already have now, we can all collaborate together and actually voice out something big, because this is an issue that needs to be tackled in a big scale. So what we can do is we collaborate with each other, and not only organizations, but also maybe with the government. Another thing besides young people and the communities is that governments maybe can try and put mental health in the curriculum, in the education system. So same as physical health. Why do we have physical exercise, but we don't have mental exercise? We have to learn how to be able to listen to other people. And then we have to be educated about how to take care of your mental health, because based on my own experience before, at school, we've never really been thought about that. But then when we're faced with the real world, and then we're faced with these mental health issues, how to be resilient, we never have the resources to cope. We never have the strategies to do that. And so I think putting that in the education system would be a great strategy. And I think also providing resources. So for example, training nurses, training doctors and other professionals at hospitals, I think would be really great on how to be able to know dealing with mental disabilities, or not even mental disabilities, anxiety, depression.
Yeah, these are three really common themes that we see literally across almost every single topic, whether it is mental health, whether it's plastic pollution, whether it's SDG number 12, like it's actually unbelievable. Those three things that you just pointed out, which is collaboration, a radical change in the education system, and providing resources. This is something that we just need to see more of. And the people that are leading it, or should be leading it with, people in power, whether that's government or industry leaders, are not recognizing these 3 points strong enough. And that's where it comes from the young people like yourselves who are preaching to the choir, as we have here a very strong community joining us for this Youthtopia Talks. But it's exactly that. And collaboration is actually SDG number 16, of seeing how we can come together to really collaborate more and work together as a whole community. So Elaine, what would you say to this question?
I think, like, in my perspective, I think we need power speak up. Because from the government's point of view, the community point of view, it won't ever be a big enough issue if nobody has sort of like the encouragement to speak up and voice out that, hello, this is an issue. So I think that the power of stories, going back to Michelle's point, if we can empower people to share their stories and share their experience in a way that not only connects with more people, but also highlights the importance, I think that is what's missing from other than the facts, industry leaders, governments, and communities. I think it's the voice of the people.
Agreed with you as well, Elaine. I mean, it's the voice of the people that matters, and we are the voice that needs to be heard, especially us as the young change makers that will shape and mold the future that we want to see, right, in all topics, including mental health. So thank you for that. And now, before we jump into the Q&A session, let's hear from Michelle Abiero. What do you think, Michelle?
Wow, I'd have to reiterate again what this amazing panelists I'm working with have said. I think education is very important, and collaboration is extremely important for us to reach where we want to go with. If you take education, for example, I think that's what Smile focuses on. We focus on education and also telling stories. With education, you are giving people the tool to empower themselves. You're giving people the tools on understanding mental health and what mental health is, different mental illnesses. You're giving them that ability to do that. Now, one thing I wish is that maybe mental health was like a compulsory, let's say, topic in a subject, be it science, be it biology or something, in our national curriculum, to allow people to know about mental health and even offer psychology as an elective in schools, because we don't have that as an elective in the national curriculum. So I think that would be extremely important. And collaboration, because we'd have legislations that we need to change. We have legislations that are no longer working for us. As the one I stated previously, that attempted suicide is illegal and one can learn jail time for that. It's something that needs to be changed. So of course, collaboration and education is extremely important. And yeah, that's all I have to say on that.
Thank you. I think, this is really insightful. I was just writing all these notes down very furiously, but I did want to ask one of our audience members to unmute and share screen. Angelina, I hope I pronounced your name right, but why don't you unmute yourself, share your video, and tell us your question and introduce yourself. Hi.
Hi, my name is Angie or Angelina. I'm from Jakarta. I'm 16. And a concern that I have is that members of the older generation and from our generation as well, obviously create their beliefs and perspectives based on cultural ideas and the way that they were raised, from their roots and what people have taught them growing up. And that kind of created the, let's say, conservative nature and thinking of certain societies. A question that I have, and one that I think about a lot, is where do you draw the line between allowing someone to believe in the values that they've grown up with and educating them on new modern ways of thinking in terms of taboo things like mental health? Thank you for taking the time to answer my question.
Angie, you have a new favorite fan. I so admire when someone can articulate a question like that. Thank you for being so on point, and definitely being based here in Indonesia. You have two panelists joining us here tonight that can give you some real insight to what Indonesia is, and I'll leave it in your hands, ladies.
So from a psychologist's point of view, because my parents are both psychologists, they never really suggest people to sort of like preach a message that people don't want to hear, if that makes sense. So whenever we're talking about mental health, like, it's important to make sure that the other person either wants to hear it or has the will to learn it, or whether we're just talking to a brick wall. Personally, when I meet someone who's not interested in talking about mental health, I try to get my point across. But if that person doesn't want to change, then I would rather focus on my strengths on preaching the message to people who actually want to hear it, especially when it's talking to the older generation and a lot of them still think of it as a taboo. If the previous methods that we've shared don't work, then I suggest taking our strengths and our resources and our time to preach it to people who do want to hear it and who can actually take action on it. Because I think as young activists, we have the tendency to want to always get our message across to every single person out there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Azel, Malati, and Michelle, but that's a tendency that we want to have. But the fact is, sometimes our voices are much louder when the message gets passed to people who can actually take action and who actually care about the topic. So maybe right now our target audience isn't right yet. And for me, I would personally shift my lens to focus on people who do have more impact, who do care, and who want to take action on it, which I believe is part of Angie's network, because I know Angie.
Yay! Super interesting, though. I think, the perspective that you give there, I'm definitely a change maker that is like, we do not have the time. We have got to share this message like with absolutely everybody. So I think that's where like my impatience and frustration gets the best of me. But very interesting point that you brought up there. Aeselia, what would you say?
Yeah, definitely I agree with Elaine. I think we cannot force someone to change their perspective on something that they don't have any interest in, or especially if they already have a belief system. I think that's just really hard to change. But what we can do is, I think the way that we're voicing out, that we're campaigning, that we're educating, it's like planting seeds in their minds, and we don't know when it's going to be fruitful, but we're just planting seeds. So it's like, from my own experience. So for example, I've never really had the passion, or I was never really concerned about climate change or use of plastic bags and all of that. But because of like people like Malati, Esta, they just like post on social media so much, and now I've already changed my behavior. Like right now, I'm actually bringing my my metal straws, and I avoid using plastic bags and all of that. And so it's kind of like that. Like maybe we can just do our parts. We don't have to target it on someone that don't have any interest at first. But because we have all these campaigns, because we're normalizing this topic, it's so talked so a lot. Maybe one day when they are experiencing it, or maybe one day when it just clicks in their head, they can start to be aware about mental health. So I think that's my take on it.
Love it, Aeselia, right? The seeds have been planted, ladies and gentlemen. It has bore fruit through Aeselia. So hopefully, again, from this Youthtopia Talks, you all can spread the seeds even further. But of course, take in consideration your time and energy, and make sure that you set those boundaries as well to really see the impact, the positive impact moving forward with this issue. Now to Michelle Abiero, what do you think? Where do we draw the line?
Again, you have to realize, as a change maker, sometimes people will want to debate you on things just to get you angry, just to get you riled up. If you waste your energy on such people, the people who will literally just come to you and ask you, what are your thoughts on, let's say, mental illness being a pseudoscience, psychiatry being a pseudoscience, and someone is just using that to rile you up. So use your energy wisely, because you cannot change everyone. You cannot change everyone. But of course, there'll come a time when almost everyone's perception will be changed, but it's a gradual process. So let's say you're working with somebody who's lukewarm when it comes to mental health. Your chances of turning them into someone who's hot on mental health is higher than trying to change ice to, something very hot. So of course, you have to work with people who are interested. For example, I am slightly interested in climate change. So if I am interested in climate change and someone wants to tell me about climate change and tells me the impact that I have when it comes to climate change, for example, with disposable masks, I was not aware the ecological risk the straps caused. And when I was educated about that, I was like, oh, let me cut off the strap, let me look for reusable masks. So if someone is willing to be educated, educate them. If they just have decided they do not want to listen and they want to make it more of an argument, then don't waste your energy.
And I think this is also really great and brings us as well to, you know, I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but I did want to allow one more audience speaker if our speakers are okay with that. Because, you know, at Youthtopia, we want to make sure that the audience joining us and the people watching this feel like they're going away with something that's tangible. And I think, Andika, your question does exactly this. It gives us a sort of tangible way of how these frontline young change makers deal with some of these things themselves. So, Andika, hi, unmute yourself, share your screen, and address the question.
Hello, guys. I'm Andika. I currently live in Surabaya, East Java. And well, I would like to pass this question for all the speakers and maybe including Melati. So you guys as the change makers always looks like strong, bold, and brave. And we people tend to see you guys only from the social medias. But actually, have you guys ever personally experienced an attack of fear, anxiety, or panic? And how you guys overcome that? Because I believe we actually might experience the same anxiety as the other people, but we don't know that. So you guys maybe can share. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andika. I love real questions. This is definitely one where I feel is a lot more personal, something that I think will hopefully end on a positive note. Just really briefly for me, I think social media is not real life. And we do get trapped in this connotation of like, wow, everything looks so perfect. And Michelle Abiero, what you said, the fake smile, right? A lot of that exists and lives on social media platforms. So for me, like, and Michelle or Elaine, you mentioned that I live in Bali, so I'm surrounded by the environment and nature. And that's how I overcome my anxiety and my like, just, yeah, the sound effect of my emotions. But I'm going to pass it over to our speakers who you came to listen to tonight. Michelle Abiero, first you.
Okay, that was a great question. And once more, thank you so much, Andika, for asking that question. Now, when it comes to telling when somebody has a mental health issue, and of course, let me first off start off with personal experiences. I do not have any mental illnesses, but of course, I have experienced maybe periods of extreme anxiety in the sense of I'm anxious maybe about exams, I'm anxious about, you know, results and different things, or whether things are going to work out. So of course, that happens to almost every human being, that we tend to be anxious and stressed at one point or the other. Now, the first thing you have to identify good coping mechanisms. By good coping mechanisms, I mean something that is healthy. So self-harm is not a healthy coping mechanism. Drinking alcohol or taking drugs is not a healthy coping mechanism. So some of the healthy coping mechanisms I identified for myself include talking to my loved ones. Sometimes you just need someone to talk to and to hear you. So that's one thing I do. There's journaling, there is exercising, there's going for a swim, taking a walk. There's nothing as beautiful as being in touch with nature. And I'm so glad Elaine does this. So yeah, when it comes to telling if somebody has a mental health problem, I think there tends to be warning symptoms such as maybe excessive mood swings. But again, it tends to be very particular for different diseases, because different conditions rather, because if it's depression, someone may have excessive mood swings, periods of lowness and sadness. But when it comes to, let's say, something as dissociative identity disorder, there may be gaps in memory. So of course, it very much differs when it comes to mental health issues. But if you feel like this person does have a mental health problem, you should probably inform them and ask them if they are comfortable enough with seeking mental health help. Because, you know, the first thing is that people are scared to get help due to the stigma around it. But once you affirm them that it is okay, it's you know, having a mental illness is not the death of you, and it's not something bad. You know, it allows them to get help.
Exactly. And I think, Andika, to answer your question, what Michelle was just so eloquently outlaying is, again, the core of it, finding a good coping mechanism, right? This is step number one. Aeselia, how would you, what are your thoughts?
Yes. So I think, thank you, Andika, for the question. I think Michelle really raised a good point. And so I think Michelle mentioned the definition of mental health at the beginning from World Health Organization, where people who have mental health are people who can cope with daily stressors, or can focus on their work in their daily life, and also have a good relationship with others. And so people, when they have poor mental health, you can see the indicators are that when they're starting to lose focus at work, starting to starting to not be productive at work, and also when their relationship with others are starting to be negatively affected. So that's when you know when your mental health is probably going down. If, for example, someone gets angry really easily, they get easily triggered, that can be an indicator of them having a poor mental health. And so I have personally experienced that as well. Everyone experiences anxiety, especially during pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainties, so it's very normal to be worried, to be anxious. But there's a point in my life where just small things really trigger me, and that time I really think to myself, I need professional help. I think I do need mental help, and that is the time when I start to seek my support system, and that's a whole lot process. So that's when you start talking to people, like your past trauma started surfacing, and you just have to deal with it. You have to deal with it, but of course you need a good support system in order for that healing process and for you to get back up, to overcome all of that.
Yeah, and healing, that's what it's all about, right? And it does come with seeking that support system, but it's not always easy, and you don't always have it with the people that are around you immediately, right? It's a process. You have to be open to one, acknowledging what you're experiencing and being okay to reach out. So Elaine, I'm going to give you the last word. What are some of the experiences you've had, and what's a tangible outcome that you can share with everybody joining us today?
Yeah, so I think I really love the idea, because since we've been talking about reaching out, I encourage anyone who's feeling a lot of anxiety to reach out to, because as a student, like, let's just be real here. This pandemic is insane. Like, we don't know where our assignments are. Courses are on Zoom. It's Zoom University every day, 8 hours. So I think, like, at some point I actually really needed to ask someone to calm me down, actually, to do like a mini meditation session. So one of my good friends, she called me up and she's like, you know what, like, let's meditate. I know you don't know how to do it because I'm not used to meditating, but she's like, I'll guide you, I'll give you strengths. Maybe, you know what, if you can't do it yet, let's just watch a YouTube video on meditation. Like, just having the intention to slow everything down really, really helps. And personally, because right now I'm going to school, but in Vancouver time, I'm having a lot of anxiety because I don't know where everything is going. So for me, helping to plan out everything actually does wonders. Like, from the littlest details to the bigger rocks, I think if we plan it out and sort of have a game plan, it reduces the anxiety by like half of it. And you know what? If all of this doesn't fail, like, I think it's important to just reach out to someone who's a professional. And for me, like, I'm not afraid to say, like, I had to ask help to meditate or to get someone to calm me down, because I think we live in a very strange time. No one's going to look down on you for being brave enough to seek for help if you need it, especially as a young change maker.
And there you heard it, guys, especially as a young change maker, where we are out there every single day on the front lines, grabbing the microphone, hosting workshops. We experience that level of anxiety, the big thoughts, the big feelings. We have it as well. And hopefully throughout this Youthtopia Talks, you were inspired, pen and paper in hand. This is really the vision of what we're trying to build here, this community, not only in mental health, but across the 17 SDGs, to make sure that we're empowering each other as young people to be able to accelerate all of these goals and all of these achievements. I want to allow everybody to share their video, because we'd like to do our signature group photo on Zoom. So please, if you would like to share your video, unmute yourself even, say a quick hello. We really encourage that as our team takes a quick screenshot photo. Thank you for joining for the first time. We really, really appreciate it. And last but not least, thank you to our speakers. You have given us incredible, valuable insight to the topic of mental health. Thank you very much, everybody.
We'll see you in the next one, all right? Stay tuned to our Instagram.
Bye.
Bye.